Amish farmers have never opened a bag of synthetic fertilizer, yet their soil still outproduces neighbors, spending thousands every season just to keep their land alive. What if the fertilizer industry has been solving the wrong problem for 80 years? Millions of gardeners buy the same blue bag every spring, convinced it's the only option. By the end of this video, you'll know the forgotten method that fixes it for good. Picture this: a farmer buys fertilizer, sees a great harvest, and assumes the bag is working. Next season, the yield dips slightly, so they add a little more. Within a few years, that farmer is spending far more on inputs just to match what the soil once produced on its own. This pattern has a name in agricultural circles, and researchers call it the fertilizer treadmill. Synthetic nitrogen gives plants an immediate boost, but it does nothing to feed the trillions of microorganisms that actually build healthy soil structure over time. Without that living network, soil slowly turns into little more than a growing medium that needs constant chemical support to function at all. Home gardeners fall into the exact same trap. A quick-release fertilizer produces lush green growth within days, so it feels like it's working. What's actually happening underneath is less encouraging. The salts in many synthetic blends can dry out beneficial fungi and bacteria, the same organisms responsible for breaking down organic matter into nutrients plants can use long-term. Over years, this creates dependency. Soil that once held moisture, resisted pests, and replenished itself now needs an outside input every single season just to stay productive. Costs climb, yields plateau, and the underlying problem never actually gets solved, it only gets masked. That's the real story most fertilizer companies won't put on the label. Understanding this problem is the first step toward the sustainable farming approach that's kept Amish soil productive for well over a century. Consider what happens on a conventional row crop farm over just one decade. Soil tests often show declining organic matter year after year, even as fertilizer applications increase to compensate. The land is technically still producing, but it's doing so on artificial support rather than genuine fertility, and farmers caught in this cycle rarely notice it happening because the decline is gradual and the bag always promises a fix. Amish farms tell a different story entirely. Families who have worked the same plots for 4 or 5 generations often report soil that feels looser, drains better, and holds moisture longer than it did decades earlier. That's not nostalgia talking, it's measurable, and it's the direct result of never letting the soil's biology collapse in the first place. If forgotten methods like this interest you, hit subscribe before we go any further. Here's where most gardeners get it backward. They believe fertilizer feeds the soil. In reality, synthetic fertilizer feeds the plant directly, completely bypassing the soil's natural systems. Healthy soil functions almost like a digestive system. Organic matter breaks down through fungi, bacteria, and earthworms, and that process slowly releases nutrients in a form roots can absorb over time. Synthetic fertilizer skips every one of those steps. It delivers nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium straight to the roots, which is exactly why growth appears so fast. The trade-off is what nobody mentions. When soil no longer needs its microbial community to produce nutrients, that community begins to shrink. Fungal networks that once transported water and minerals across the root zone start to disappear. Earthworm populations drop because there's less organic matter for them to process. Slowly, the soil's ability to support itself weakens. Amish farming communities never adopted this model, largely because most of their operations began well before synthetic fertilizer became widely available, and many chose to keep it that way on principle. Their approach treats soil fertility as something to build, not something to purchase. That single shift in thinking changes almost every decision that follows, from what gets planted where, to how animal manure gets used, to how often a field gets left to rest. This is the contrarian reveal that changes everything. The goal was never to feed the plant faster, it was always to build soil that could feed itself. Think about what this means for the roots themselves. In biologically active soil, fungal threads called mycorrhizae attach to plant roots and extend their reach far beyond what the roots could access alone, pulling in water and trace minerals from areas the plant could never reach on its own. When synthetic fertilizer is applied repeatedly, plants stop investing energy in that fungal partnership because the nutrients simply show up on their own. The relationship weakens and eventually it can disappear from a field almost entirely. Without that underground network, plants become more fragile in exactly the moments that matter most: during drought, during sudden temperature swings, during pest pressure. Soil fertility, in other words, isn't just about growth, it's about resilience. And that resilience is precisely what gets lost when every nutrient arrives through a bag instead of through a living system. So what does that actually look like in practice? 3 techniques form the backbone of Amish soil fertility, and none of them require a chemical company. The first is crop rotation, cycling different plant families through the same field year after year. Corn one season, then legumes, then a grain crop, then a resting period with cover crops. This constant variation prevents any single nutrient from being stripped from the soil, and different root structures naturally break up compaction at different depths. The second is manure composting. Rather than applying raw manure straight to fields, Amish farmers typically age and compost it first, allowing beneficial microbes to stabilize nutrients before they ever touch the soil. Raw manure can burn plant roots and introduce pathogens, while properly composted manure feeds soil biology gently and consistently. The third is cover cropping, planting things like clover, rye, or vetch, specifically to protect and feed the soil between main growing seasons. These cover crops prevent erosion, suppress weeds, and when they're eventually turned back into the earth, they add a fresh layer of organic matter that keeps microbial activity high year-round. This isn't just farm folklore. The Rodale Institute's Farming Systems Trial, the longest-running side-by-side comparison of organic and conventional agriculture in North America, has tracked these same practices for more than 40 years. Its data shows soil health in organically managed systems keeps climbing over time, while soil in conventionally managed systems stays essentially flat. There's also a fourth element that ties everything together, and it's patience. Fields are often rested on a multi-year cycle, left to recover under a cover crop rather than pushed for maximum yield every single season. This might look like lost productivity on paper, but it's actually an investment. None of these techniques work in isolation. Rotation prevents nutrient depletion, composting rebuilds what's been used, cover cropping protects the surface, and rest allows biology to fully recover. Together they form a closed loop where soil is never simply extracted from. It's continuously replenished. None of this requires acres of farmland. Here's how to apply the same principles in a backyard bed or raised container. Start with composting. Set aside a corner of your yard or use a simple bin for kitchen scraps, dry leaves and grass clippings. Let it break down a few months before working it into your soil. This single habit does more for long-term fertility than almost anything sold in a garden center. Next, rotate your plant families each season. According to University of Illinois Extension, planting the same crop family in the same spot repeatedly depletes the specific nutrients that family relies on, while rotating families gives high-demand nutrients time to replenish and lets varying root depths naturally improve soil aeration. If tomatoes grew in a bed this year, move them to a different spot next year and plant something like beans or peas there instead. Beans and peas actually add nitrogen back into the soil as they grow, setting up whatever you plant there next for stronger results. A simple 4-bed rotation cycling through fruiting plants, leafy greens, root vegetables, and legumes keeps most home gardens balanced for years. Add a cover crop during your off-season. Clover works well for smaller spaces and adds nitrogen back into the soil. Simply cut it down and let it decompose in place before your next planting. One common mistake is tilling too aggressively. Heavy tilling disrupts the fungal networks this method depends on, so a light touch works far better than turning soil over completely every season. A pro tip that makes a real difference: mulch heavily with straw or shredded leaves after planting. This keeps moisture consistent, suppresses weeds naturally, and slowly feeds the soil as it breaks down, all without a single synthetic input. Give this system a full growing season before expecting dramatic results. Soil biology takes time to rebuild, but most gardeners notice darker, richer, better draining soil within the first year. Raised beds benefit from a thinner mulch layer since drainage is faster, while in-ground gardens can handle heavier mulch to retain moisture through summer heat. Container gardens can follow a scaled-down version too. Mixing finished compost into potting soil each season replaces the need for rotation, since the growing medium refreshes every time you plant. The financial comparison surprises most people once they actually run the numbers. A season's worth of synthetic fertilizer for an average garden can easily cost $50 to $80, and that expense repeats every single year with no end in sight. Composting, by comparison, is essentially free. It uses materials you're already throwing away, and once a rotation is established, ongoing costs drop close to zero. Cover crop seed for a small garden runs just a few dollars and can be reused season after season if allowed to go to seed naturally. There's a time savings angle too. Chemical-free garden systems require less frequent intervention once established, since the soil handles nutrient cycling largely on its own. Gardeners following this method often report spending less time managing pests as well, since biologically active soil tends to produce stronger, more resistant plants from the start. The upfront effort is real. Building a compost system and planning rotations takes more thought than opening a bag. But the long-term payoff in both cost and soil health is exactly why this approach has outlasted every fertilizer trend of the last century. Zoom out over a 5-year window and the gap becomes even more obvious. A household relying on synthetic fertilizer could easily spend $300 to $400 keeping a modest garden productive, with results that plateau or even decline as the soil grows more dependent. A household building soil naturally spends a fraction of that and finishes the same 5 years with ground that's measurably healthier than when they started. One system rents fertility year after year, the other one owns it outright. 3 things are worth remembering here. Fertilizer feeds plants, but composting and cover cropping feed the soil itself. That difference determines whether your garden needs more help every year or less. And the Amish method proves that the oldest solution is often still the most effective one. None of this requires giving up modern conveniences or living off the grid. It simply asks you to treat your soil the way generations of farmers already have, as a living system worth investing in rather than a surface to dose with chemicals. The compost bin in the corner of your yard can do more for your garden's future than any bag on a store shelf ever will. If this changed how you think about your own garden, subscribe for more forgotten methods that actually work, and drop a comment letting us know what you'd like to see tested next. Our next video uncovers a similar secret hiding in how traditional farmers managed pests without a single spray bottle. Keep it natural, keep it simple, and let your soil do what it was always built to do.